Part 109. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 1085. The girl Tesna's boxing skills seemed to be very superficial. Compared with the opponent's conscious opponent, she was obviously a little worse in movement response and prediction. Coupled with her inferior strength, she gradually fell into a disadvantage. If the concept of boxing wasn't stronger than the opponent's, she would have been unable to hold on long ago. I want to pursue the ultimate in strength. How can I fall here? Xylan's roar echoed in his ears again. Seeing the girl who was still struggling, Garen seemed to remember the pain he suffered under his own boxing skills. Xylan endured hardship. These ordinary people are far from even reaching the realm of being flawless. Although being flawless is only relative, flaws will break out when strength and speed are different. However, the flawlessness of simple ordinary people can be achieved through advanced computer simulation training. Just like the Eagle's Nest of Black Pen Academy. Obviously, this Tesna is just an ordinary person and cannot access that level. Left knee hit forward. Garen suddenly spoke up. Bang. Tesna involuntarily bumped her front knee, and it landed strangely on the lower body of her opponent who was trying to dodge. With a pop, something seemed to be broken. The tall man held his lower body and howled miserably, rolling around on the ground. Tesna froze on the spot, as if she didn't expect that her move just now was so powerful. Suddenly, two other men surrounded him with gloomy expressions. And the girl who was caught had escaped without knowing when, but she was left alone. The two sides were about to fight again for the second time, but Garen was getting tired of it. Although the girl who betrayed his friend brought him a little surprise and fun, such scenes were very common. However, the girl in the white dress, Tesna, was so innocent and kind, which made him feel a little emotional. Turing, deal with them. Garen gave a calm order. Yes. A black shadow suddenly jumped out of the darkness, passing three men in an instant. There were three muffled sounds in an instant, and the three men fainted at the same time. The black shadow quickly penetrated into the darkness and disappeared. Garen didn't bother to look any further and turned around to leave. Tesna was left standing there alone in a daze. She knew immediately that she had met an expert. He must be a master. Her heart suddenly jumped wildly. The outbreak of the war caused people to have a serious lack of sense of security, so more and more people practiced martial arts. They were good at fighting skills and equipped with micromechas to strengthen themselves. This is a good way of self-protection. Due to the increasingly rampant public security problems, the government has relaxed restrictions on micromechas, and anyone with money can buy one. This has also caused the martial arts to become more and more popular. Tesna is a typical fighting fanatic and a typical character with a serious lack of sense of security. Etc. She shouted loudly and ran after Garen. Unexpectedly, Garen seemed to be walking very slowly in the dark, but in fact he couldn't catch up. Tesna felt strange, but she was even more sure that the other party was definitely a master, and not an ordinary master. We must not miss this opportunity. Absolutely. Tesna gritted her teeth and ran wildly. Even if her socks were worn out and her skirt was torn by the wind, she didn't notice at all. Long chased after her, but the distance did not get closer as she accelerated, but instead became farther and farther away. Why are you chasing me? A voice rang in her ear. Hoo. To become a disciple, Tesna was out of breath, sweating profusely, and her face had an abnormal blush. For apprenticeship, Garen stopped. The instant stop caused Tesna behind him to almost hit him, and he suddenly braked suddenly. Only then did his feet feel a burning pain, which was obviously worn out. What Garen admires is a person with strong willpower, just like Xingyo in the radiation zone, the child who had no qualifications but always persisted in working hard, so he helped her get the hope of the sixth wind god general, a person who can escape from her own destiny. Hope. And now he seemed to see a trace of such qualities in this girl. Being my disciple is not that easy. He turned around and looked at the girl in front of him, who was not pretty but had a good temperament, and said quietly. I know Tesna didn't say much, but her tone was firm. Looking at this little guy, Garen suddenly remembered that in the totem world and the secret martial world, he seemed to have the same fondness for this kind of child with a cold temperament but a strong will. It's the same now. You have to understand that if you want to become my teacher, you have to accept my test. And some tests are so difficult that you can't even imagine. Tesna recalled the strange scene she had just seen. Just as soon as the black shadow turned, the three of them fainted without any resistance. As an ordinary person with no qualifications, even if she practices consciousness, she is like a deflated balloon. There is no way at all. Perhaps this person in front of her is her only hope. I'm not afraid. She nodded affirmatively. With Garen's current status, it is natural that he will not simply accept disciples. As the leader of the Scarlet Snow sect, the most genius in history and the strongest person who has inherited the will of dozens of ancestors, he is destined to surpass the first sect leader and reach the level of an unprecedented realm. With such a level of strength, the apprentice he accepts will have a profound impact, not only on him, but also on everyone under his command. What do you want to learn from me? Garen asked with interest. Fighting skills. Powerful fighting skills, Tesna said without any hesitation. Fighting skills. Garen suddenly laughed. I have 3 tests. If you can pass, I will decide to accept you as a disciple and teach you fighting skills. Tesna's eyes suddenly lit up, and her breathing that had been rapid just now was suddenly suppressed and calmed down, for fear that she might have missed something. Which 3? I will definitely be fine. Don't talk big yet. Garen stretched out a finger. First, it is a snowy day. Within 2 days, you have to dig a 2-meter deep hole with your bare hands. Remember, you can only use your hands. Only with your hands, Tesna repeated. Go ahead and dig out the mass graves on the south side of the city. Remember, you can't use other tools. Use your fingers to touch the soil bit by bit and dig it out, Garen added. I will come and see you then. If I can't do that, then don't mention becoming a disciple. I go. Tesna agreed flatly without any hesitation. She didn't ask how she found her, she just turned around and left without any hesitation. Tisk tisk. Maybe it's really a good seedling. Garen shook his head slightly. Next, let's go visit the teacher. Looking at Tesna's leaving figure, Garen turned around and slowly disappeared into the darkness, completely disappearing. Traveling through the inner courtyard is just a simple use of consciousness for Garen, and the computer protection capabilities here are useless to high-level energy mechanics. The energy mark calculated the loopholes in an instant. Garen walked into the outer courtyard calmly and walked around the college, which had not changed much. He didn't see any familiar people and they were all new students, so he went directly to the inner courtyard. The inner courtyard is underground. After obtaining a student status for himself, Garen naturally entered the underground space with several inner courtyard students. The artificial sun still shines on the entire inner courtyard. Like the outside world, it is a bit deserted here. Obviously there are too few people who meet the high standards of the inner courtyard. There are almost no people on the street. Most of the shops are closed, only a few are open, and there are very few customers coming in and out. It's just that compared to outside, there are maintenance robots doing cleaning and repair work here. Galen checked the address based on the map obtained from the internal network, but there was no change. However, the director of the security bureau has changed from Phyla to Red-Eyed Metro. This resonance master, who was extremely powerful at the beginning, is now unknown to his strength. Following the original route, we directly came to the teacher Fan Duo's residence again. It was still the small house, double-layered in white, and looked very ordinary. Just as he was about to knock on the door opened automatically. Inside, A yellow-haired woman over 2 meters tall looked at Garen in confusion. Who are you looking for? Garen's image and temperament have changed drastically at this time. In the eyes of conscious people, he has a faint chill all over his body, and he is completely different from the original Nono Siwa. Coupled with the terrifying transformation of the peacock skill in the cold region, now there is only a faint outline of it before. Senior Sister Galifei, Garen smiled and gently handed over the other party's name. Senior Sister? How do you know me? I don't remember that the teacher has you as a disciple, right? Galifei was one of 3 people who had 2 senior brothers and 1 senior sister in Fanduo back then. How are junior brother Maluo and junior sister Naihui doing? Have you forgotten me in such a short time? Garen said with a smile. I am Nono Siwa. Nono, Garaf's expression suddenly became very strange. Nono Siwa, who was announced by the teacher to have rebelled against the Black Disk territory, suddenly came back. Aren't you going to invite me in? Garen shrugged. Only then did Galifei's stunned expression come to his senses. Please come in. She quickly opened the door. Garen walked in the door minding his own business, but did not hear the smart butler's voice. Why did you expect to come back suddenly? Didn't you leave? Galifei seemed to have only heard a little bit of the original news. Obviously, the teacher Fanduo did not tell him everything. After all, Garen was a victim of the factional struggle. If the truth was spread everywhere, it would cause considerable damage to the reputation of the Black Annihilation sect itself. I left for many years and missed my hometown, so I came back. Garen walked into the living room and sat down to rest. Back then, I escaped by chance and left the Black Pan territory. What happened next? Senior Sister, how about you tell me? I heard that Phyla and the 7th Wind God General who had tried to encircle and suppress me all became traitors, so my case must have been overturned, right? Galifei sat down with a hint of complexity in his eyes opposite Garen and poured a glass of juice for the 2 of them. The verdict has indeed been overturned. Your case has long been concluded that you were wrongly accused. The statement of your case has been issued for a long time. It's just that the monster that suddenly appeared when you were encircled and suppressed massacred many soldiers and civilians. Although you were encircled and suppressed in the end, eliminate, but she is not a fool. Although she doesn't know the truth, she can feel some things, such as Fanduo's original attitude, and the attitude of Blanding, who originally supported Garen, and the siege mecha that suddenly appeared in the hospital. Force. His disciples were surrounded and suppressed, but as a teacher, he was indifferent. Isn't this attitude obvious enough? Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 1086. By the way, I'll call the teacher back right away. He will be very happy to have you back. Although he was a little confused, Galifei knew after all that Nono Siwa came here this time for his teacher Fanduo. Although she didn't know what Nono had experienced over the years, she could tell from the big changes in him that this experience would not be a good one. It is impossible for a good experience to change a person so much. Galen took a sip of short-term juice. It was many years ago that he was sitting on the sofa in the teacher's house drinking juice like this. This kind of peaceful and leisurely life is not suitable for him now. How are you doing now? I also asked for information about you through my connections. Unfortunately, no one has seen you since you disappeared. Everyone speculates that you went to the radiation zone, otherwise it would be impossible for the entire domain to be safe. Can't find it. Galuf informed the teacher and asked with emotion. It's not bad, I can barely get by these years. Garen knew that the other party thought he was a student back then, and maybe he hadn't reached the high stage of resonance yet, and now he's back. Don't worry, the teacher will definitely understand you, and if your case is overturned, you will definitely be able to live a good life in the area again. By the way, where are your family members? I went to your home address later, and found that it has already been moved. Galifei is a very kind-hearted woman. Although she looked strong and tall, she was able to take care of her junior brothers and sisters without any requirements. If she hadn't been kind-hearted in her heart, it would have been impossible to get paid in such a materialistic society. At first, because Garen was also her junior brother, she also spent some time checking around, but unfortunately there was no result. Settled, Garen smiled. Yes, don't worry, the teacher is much older now. Last time, two of your senior brothers rebelled. Galuf picked up the cup and took a sip, looking downcast. Looking back now, everything that happened seemed like a dream. Teacher, and I beg for mercy, and since you were wronged at the beginning, it will be fine if you come back to settle down and rejoin the family. Galufii showed a gentle smile. Garen lowered his head, unable to see the expression on his face clearly. Here he comes. The teacher will be back soon. Galuf suddenly raised his voice. I saw his position, not far away, and he is rushing back. A smile appeared on her face. Look, as soon as he heard that you were back, he returned immediately without any delay. Garen was holding the juice, covering most of his face with the cup, and drank it quietly. The two sat on the sofa. Galufii kept talking about what had happened in recent years, while Garen listened quietly and smiled from time to time. Bang! Suddenly a dull voice came from outside. A dusty black figure wearing a windbreaker strode into the hall. Fan Duo is still the wizened old man he was before, holding a cane in his hand. His back is slightly hunched, and the wrinkles on his skin and face are getting denser. On the right side of the neck, a dark blue code number can be vaguely seen printed on the skin. It is still the same as before, but the color is lighter. As soon as he entered the door, his eyes immediately fell on Garen. You still know how to come back, in a stern tone. He also felt a little guilty about the disciple in front of him whom he had given up on. This talented disciple had become a victim due to a fight between branches within the section. It was also because he didn't really fully support him, but as a teacher, it was impossible for him to admit his mistakes to his disciples. He, Fan Duo, has never admitted his fault to anyone in all his life. Garen and Galafi stood up and turned to face Vander. Teacher, Garen said softly. He looked calmly at the old man who was getting older. He was deeply affected by the death of his two disciples. His life and death were uncertain among all his disciples. Two senior brothers died in the rebellion, and only one female disciple was considered worthy. Stable, but it no longer has its original influence within the Black Annihilation sect. I don't have an apprentice like you, Fan Duo said coldly. Looking at Garen's appearance at this time, there was no trace of consciousness left on his body, and his appearance changed drastically. After all, his heart softened slightly, his consciousness was completely disabled, and he was alone outside. The difficulties are naturally extremely difficult. A few years ago, it was also a war period. Now that you're back, go to the eagle's nest immediately. Get your consciousness back as soon as possible. Teacher Garen still spoke calmly. Originally, he didn't have much resentment towards Fan Duo. Although he gave up on him in the end, he helped him a lot at the beginning. This is the last time I will visit you as a disciple. Perhaps, this is also the last time I call you that. As soon as these words came out, Galafii in the hall was stunned. Fan Duo also looked stunned and took a deep breath. What are you talking about? No, Galuf shouted quickly, you haven't apologized to the teacher yet. Don't ruin your future on impulse. The teacher is just talking. Shut up. Before he finished speaking, he was interrupted by Fan Duo. Fan Duo's face turned red and his hands were trembling a little. He looked at Garen intently. What did you say just now? I didn't hear clearly. His voice was trembling. This was the biggest concession he could make. He is Fan Duo and will never admit his mistake. No way. Ignoring Galafi's wild wink beside him, Garen raised his head and faced Fan Duo calmly. Teacher, some things happen and you can never go back. Cannot go back. There was silence in the hall. Not yet completely over the death of his two carefully cultivated disciples, Fan Duo's mood at the moment was completely unimaginable. He was the one who gave up Galen in the first place, but that was probably the reason why this disciple was so capable of causing trouble, not only from the hostile branches, but also from Phyla's forces, and other inexplicable forces exerting their power. Now, originally, he put down everything in his hands and hurried back, thinking that he saw hope. Maybe Nono came back to him after thinking about it? Maybe this was an opportunity to make up for his original mistakes, but now it seems. Fan Duo looked at this talented disciple who he had placed high hopes on, and now he has completely reduced to an ordinary person, with not even a trace of pilot consciousness left, but even with this appearance, he is still unwilling to bow in front of him. Two disciples died in battle, one wanted to rebel, and two children were seriously ill. Only one female disciple was left, but she lacked qualifications and may not be able to break through in her lifetime. Am I really wrong? For the first time, Fan Duo couldn't help but ask himself this. No. I can't be wrong. It's them. It's them who don't understand me. An awkward feeling burst out in his heart. I'm just here to tell you, teacher, that I don't blame you for what happened back then, but everything was even at that time. Garen spoke again. Looking at the obviously tough-tongued old man in front of him, he finally said what he meant calmly. No, Galifei shouted anxiously from the side. It's okay. Garen smiled gently at her. It's okay, Fan Duo spoke, his face was very gloomy, and a deep sense of fatigue emanated from him. You are an ordinary person who has no consciousness. In this war era, even if you rely on your brain to live well for a while, do you think you can live like this for a lifetime? Stupid. Ridiculous. The only person who can rely on is himself. Yes, the only person you can rely on is yourself. Garen smiled. The teacher has taught me this truth very deeply, hasn't he? Fan Duo opened his lips and said no more. For a moment, the three of them stopped talking, and there was only a thick and inexplicable emotion in the hall. After a long time, Fan Duo raised his hand, and his whole person seemed to be older. After you leave this door, you are no longer a disciple of my Black Oblivion section. Even if you beg me in the future, I will never give you another chance. He stared at Garen closely, his eyes filled with anger, depression, sadness, and a hint of pleading in the deepest part. He, Fan Duo, had no heirs in his life, and his disciples were everything to him. But now his disciples are dying of fatal diseases. Everything he has worked hard for and cultivated in his life seems to be just to prove his mistake. He repeated in his mind that he was right, but the calmer Garen's eyes looked in front of him, the sadder he felt in his heart. Not only did he think of his two disciples who died in the battle, but also those years ago. His wife died because of him. Garen looked at the old man in front of him who was almost overwhelmed by the war. He didn't know what he wanted to see when he came back this time. Was he coming back just to make the old man admit that he was wrong? Maybe. He smiled, turned, and walked out of the hall. That's it, his voice faintly echoed in the hall. I'm telling you. You have no consciousness. Do you think others really value you? Once you leave this door, never come back. The old man's voice was shaking with anger from behind. Garen did not stop, just paused, but slowly walked towards the exit gate of the yard. Mistakes are mistakes. Many things have been lost because of mistakes, but I still don't want to admit them. This is also the sadness of Fan Duo. Everyone is reluctant to admit that they are wrong. The moment he stepped out of the door, Garen didn't hear any more sounds from behind him. It was quiet, as if dead. He knew that what Fan Duo was sad about was not himself, but his own life. He tried to finally use his coercion and dissuasion to prove that he was right, that he was not wrong and that others were wrong. This will make everything clear. Garen raised his head and glanced at the artificial sun above his head. It's time to go see how well that little guy is digging the hole. Garen didn't look back and strode away from the underground. After not walking far, he saw a tall woman wearing a red tight leather jacket standing beside him. The woman has red eyes and a messy shawl of black hair, giving her a wild look. Red-eyed Medairo, Garen recognized this person instantly. Although I don't know who brought you into the inner courtyard, please show me your identification. Naturally, Medairo came here specifically for Garen. She received a report that someone had entered the inner courtyard irregularly, looked at the data, and found something was wrong, so she rushed over in person. Suddenly, Metro seemed to hear something, and his expression suddenly relaxed. He took a deep look at Garen. "You can leave, but don't let me catch you next time." Garen smiled and nodded. Turning slightly and looking behind him, he knew that it must have been his senior sister or fan duo who had just spoken to smooth things over for him. After all, he didn't say anything more and strode away, heading towards the lift exit. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 1087. Graveyard in the south of the city. A delicate girl in a white dress was frantically digging into the soil with her fingers. The soil was very hard, and her hands were covered with blood, but she had no intention of stopping. The pit in front of him was already more than 10 centimeters deep and half a meter wide, and there was blood-stained soil everywhere on the edge. There are few people here. Some people who come to visit the grave just look at the girl from a distance and then leave. There are not only 1 or 2 people who have gone crazy because of the death of their relatives, and this is not the first time they have seen such behavior. The gravegoers came and left, and came again. The sky was always dark clouds, and the snow fell heavier and heavier. The ground was covered with a thick layer of white snow. The girl was frozen stiff all over, and her hands were already a little purple. The wounds caused by digging the pit were covered with frostbite. Even though her body was strong due to her regular martial arts practice, and even though she was wearing special thermal underwear, she had not rested for a long time and had not eaten, which caused her physical strength to decline even more. Even though her nails were broken, the girl showed no regrets at all and continued to dig underground quickly. Unfortunately, the soil was very hard and mixed with even harder stones. Some of the gravels were embedded in her bloody mouth, and the pain made the girl sweat on her forehead. Tesna. What are you doing here? Come back with me. A tall and strong man stood on the side at some point, staring at the girl and sternly said. This is a test. Testa glanced at the man. Brother, please go back, it's cold here. How can you be so self-destructive without consciousness? Test. Whose test would make you dig your hands full of blood here? Let's go. Come back with me. The man strode closer and grabbed Tesna. Powerful, the strength and consciousness made Tesna unable to resist. Let me go, she started to resist. If you dig any further, your hands will become useless, the man was furious. You are an ordinary person who cannot practice consciousness. If someone hadn't teased you, do you think someone could really change your qualifications? This is my decision. Let go, the girl shouted. She bit the man's arm hard. Are you looking for death? The man immediately threw her away, and when he saw that his arm was bitten and bleeding, he became even more angry. If Dad hadn't asked me to take care of you before he passed away, do you think I would really want to take care of you? I said, you don't have to worry about it. Tesna fell down on the snow, her face turned red and purple, and she didn't know whether she was angry or cold. She and the man in front of her are not biological brothers and sisters. She followed her father and formed a new family with the other person's mother. There is no blood relationship. When her father was still alive, although she had no qualifications, she lived a good life. But now that her father has passed away, the family property has been taken over by her brother's mother, who has become more and more indifferent to her. This is the only brother who, although he talks fiercely, actually always takes care of her intentionally or unintentionally. He says he doesn't care, but he always cares about her. But now this brother is about to get married and start a family of his own, and she has grown up, and there is no reason to let him take care of her anymore. She must be independent and go her own way. You go back, I am responsible for my own affairs, Tesna said loudly. Her brother struggled with her here for a long time, but in the end he couldn't stop her, so he finally went home in anger. Before leaving, I couldn't help but leave behind a pair of thick leather gloves and a shovel. It's a pity that Tesna turned a blind eye and continued to dig the soil with her bare hands. This was not the first time she had done something like this. Someone had deceived her before, but every time she did it seriously, and she almost had an accident many times, but she always had a sense of luck. One day you will meet the real thing. If you really meet it and you give up at that time, won't all the previous efforts be completely in vain? In the distance, Garin was hiding silently in mid-air, quietly watching Tesna's constant digging. Even he couldn't help but feel a little moved when he saw that she really didn't wear gloves at all, didn't use a shovel, and was just digging so frantically that her fingers were almost broken. After all, he just said a word, and the other party carried it out so thoroughly. Such disciples and subordinates are not encountered casually. We will observe it for a while and then talk about it. One of them dug, the other watched, and time passed slowly. Tesna's brother came to visit a few more times, each time with growing concern. Apart from him, no one in the family comes here to care. Tesna has become more and more marginalized in the entire family. Now the reason why she did such a stupid thing has been found out. The reason is actually to become a disciple. A so-called fighting master who she met by chance casually said something and asked her to do this. Unexpectedly, this guy actually believed it. The ladies in the family all laughed at her for being stupid. She would just believe someone he met was a master? Even if he is a master, how strong can a person who practices fighting skills be? Can he be better than a pilot? Of course it's impossible. To achieve this level in order to learn fighting skills can no longer be described as stupid. However, this is not the only stupid thing Tesna has done, and everyone is accustomed to it. The core of the family is Dosane, a member with level 3 consciousness who is about to get married. Everyone is busy planning an elegant and noble wedding. As for ordinary people like Tesna who have no qualifications, they have long been marginalized in the family. Her father was incompetent, and her mother didn't recognize her at all. If it hadn't been for her brother to take care of her, the family would have cut off her monthly payment. The next day, Garin walked slowly from a distance and stood next to Tesna, watching her dig until she was bleeding. Tesna looked at him and dug harder. One of them was watching and the other was digging, and neither of them spoke. At noon, the dark clouds faded slightly, and a ray of sunlight shone down from the middle of the clouds. A group of beautifully dressed girls came from a distance, surrounded by several bodyguards. Looking at Garin standing and Tesna digging in the soil from a distance, they pointed and laughed at the show. They obviously came here to have fun. Is that the fighter who asked her to dig in the soil? He looks pretty good. It's a pity that he's a lunatic. Isn't it good for a psycho to meet a psycho? The two of them teach peerless fighting skills, which happens to be the most commonly written plot in those novels. I guess Tesna must have read too many novels. My fingers are almost useless, but Tesna's perseverance is pretty good. Some people had a positive opinion. Perseverance. Do psychopaths have perseverance? I doubt that guy has no pain nerves, right? It hurts when I look at it. How could she be able to endure it for so long? She used to practice fighting skills like crazy, but her body was almost broken. She's exhausted from practice, and if her brother hadn't discovered it, she would have died somewhere. A group of people talked and laughed, looked at Garin for a while, and then looked at Garin. They didn't feel the consciousness in him at all, so they were completely sure that this guy was a liar who deceived people, but he still dared to stand and watch after he deceived people. That is probably a liar with a brain problem. People always have a herd mentality. When they see people watching here, new people will soon join in and watch what's going on here. However, once the novelty wore off and the weather was cold, everyone soon felt bored and left one after another. At this time, Tesna's finger bones had been completely frozen to death. She couldn't feel the pain anymore, and she still kept digging. Enough. Finally, Garin spoke. This pit is enough, he said calmly. Enough. Tesna was stunned for a moment, stopped slowly, and looked at the blood-stained earth pit and her hands that were completely dead. Maybe an amputation? This thought came to her mind. Does it worth? For martial arts? The answer has never been firmer. Worth. Because this is the only way she can strengthen herself. It is the only hope. How can those qualified people understand her pain? Now, jump in and bury yourself in it. Garen's next words immediately made her eyes widen. Of course, you have passed the first test. This is the second. Remember to leave your head open. Tesna looked at Garen and then at the pit. She didn't expect that the second test would be to bury herself alive. There was no expression on Garen's face, he just looked at her calmly. Don't want to? Even if I didn't say it? No. Tesna jumped into the pit and began to push the surrounding soil into her pit with her hands. After a while, coupled with the heavy snow that continued to fall, she soon buried herself until only her arms were exposed. As her hands reached into the pit, she stopped moving and allowed the heavy snow to gradually submerge her. Soon someone in the family noticed a new change, and people came to watch the two of them again. After discovering that there was a new trick, these people suddenly started to watch the fun again. Pointing in the distance, it was like watching a monkey show in a circus, talking and laughing, and eating the snacks I brought with me. Tesna was hungry and thirsty, her whole body turned purple with cold, her blood had become extremely viscous, her eyes were dazzled, and she had no strength. She just instinctively bit into the snow near her mouth, but because the temperature in her mouth was too low, it will take a long time for the snow water to melt. She felt like she might be dying. But Garen was watching her expressionlessly from the side. What if he is really just lying to me? This thought couldn't be suppressed and ran through Tas's mind. You can choose to give up at any time, Garen's voice came faintly. Tesna opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She was silent. Even if she gave up now and went back, she would become seriously ill, and it was unknown whether she would survive. It's all reached this point. Are you going to die? The ladies watching from a distance kept laughing. In this era of war, the death of one or two people would not attract any attention at all. The war has made it difficult to maintain basic social order in the Black Pan territory. Everyone can only rely on their own strength. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 1088. Until Tesna completely buried herself in the frozen soil, Garen looked up at the heavy snow falling in the sky. Almost his face was expressionless, making people wonder what he was thinking. He just stood quietly on the side and waited. The sky is getting darker and darker, and the people watching the excitement have lost their novelty and gradually left. Garen actually walked away slowly, seemingly ignoring Tesna, who was buried underground. Not long after he left, Tesna's brother also came. He rushed over and frantically tried to dig up the soil, but the weak Tesna refused. Just after being dug out by it, he buried himself inside again. What makes his brother feel weird is that Tesna, who should have been very weak, actually still has the strength to resist him. Garen, however, no longer paid attention to what was going on there. Whether he would accept a disciple or not would depend on his mood and whether Tesna was qualified. And now, before the energy tide breaks out, he has to settle the grudge with the original seventh wind god general. Walking on the deserted street, Garen's whole body floated gently unknowingly, but no one noticed his figure. The huge consciousness distorted the senses of everyone around him who saw him. Garen flew straight in the direction of the Aurora domain. Below him was the bustling city with decadence in the Black Pan domain. Speeding cars passed by him from time to time, but he failed to notice that there was a figure above him out of thin air. Fly. Looking at the huge city below, Garen felt a little emotional. When the energy tide arrives, here, the Aurora domain, the Snail domain, the Maria domain, and all the surrounding areas will fall into complete energy annihilation. This is the general trend of history. The energy tide is inevitable and no one can avoid it. This is the birth of parts of the Red King, and the emergence of forbidden mecha parts. Perhaps the White King's subordinates have arrived and lurked in this place, Garen speculated in his mind. After all, it is a part of the Red King that can be ranked alongside the White King in destiny. There is no room for anyone to ignore it. He looked down at the landscapes and cities below that were constantly passing by him. Perhaps the White King's minions are hidden somewhere deep below. Suddenly, a faint signal shot straight into the sky from below and reached his mind. The signal seemed to be sent by someone very close, with a sense of awe. Oh! I almost forgot that there is such a chess piece here. Garen suddenly smiled, and immediately pressed down, flying directly to a city below. In the middle of the city with yellow and white architectural style, a man with golden curly hair, the woman with long hair shawl, was looking up at the sky blankly. The woman is very beautiful, with light red eyes and skin as delicate as porcelain. It is so easy to do skincare in this era, which also results in almost no ugly people. Even if the skin is good, no matter how ugly it is, it will not be any worse. What's wrong? Captain Inari, a woman's voice came out faintly from behind. No, I have something to do at the moment. It's very important. Can you please go out? Inari immediately realized what she was doing and said in a hurry. Well, in that case, let's talk about this cooperation when we have the opportunity in the future. The woman left with some dissatisfaction. The sound of opening and closing the door came from behind. Inari breathed out slightly and turned around. Check whether the other party is really gone. Suddenly a hand slowly stretched out from behind and gently rubbed her cheek. Long time no see, Captain Inari, how did you complete my employment mission? A man's joking voice came from behind her. Inari stiffened. Her charming mercenary group has been disbanded long ago, and is now a larger mercenary group that has been re-established, and her current employer is no longer an ordinary character like Nono Siwa, but a real big shot in each domain. And the source of all this is her inexplicable sudden improvement in her own strength and quality. Instantly improving her physical fitness by 3 times, her actual combat ability has improved a lot, which is 1 level higher than before. This is the key reason why she can advance to the next level so quickly. Nono Siwa. Sir, she finally added an honorific at the end. For some reason, her body was trembling slightly. It seems that he is afraid. What are you afraid of? Garen gently reached out and pinched her face. This mercenary leader, who had only been in contact for a short time, seemed to be doing well at this time. No, it's not my fault. You can't blame me for what happened back then. I tried my best. But it was useless. Inari's body began to tremble more and more. Only she, as a parasite, could sense from the vague mother's body. Feel how powerful Galleon is. The more powerful she felt, the more fearful she became. It's none of my business. I stopped it. Even Julie and the others were dead and I was the only one who managed to escape. Inari's body felt a little cold, and she began to defend herself. Garen was vaguely confused, not knowing what she was afraid of. He heard Inali's constant muttering that it was none of her business, and the doubts and uneasiness in his heart grew stronger and stronger. He suddenly thought of that matter. One of the purposes of his coming back this time was that, apart from absorbing the energy tide, the most important thing was to confirm that matter himself. "Tell me everything that happened back then," he said in a low voice, with a hint of consciousness and intimidation. "Yes." Inari looked stunned, and her eyes suddenly became dull. Garen's current suggestion was supported by the consciousness of not falling down. Inari only resonated with the crescent level and had no power to resist at all. "I was completely hypnotized in an instant. Back then, I accidentally discovered it during my mission." Inari spoke slowly, and as she slowly narrated, Garen's face remained expressionless, but his eyes became colder. As expected, things took a turn in the direction he least wanted to see. "Who was the person who left just now?" Garen interrupted her unfinished words. "It's Blanding," Inali replied with a dull expression. "Bring her back." Inari Ruyan began to take out her phone to inform Blanding who had just left. After a while, there was another knock on the door. "Please come in." Inari came back to her senses and broke away from Garen's control. She looked defeated and tried to stabilize her emotions before responding loudly. Click. "Mrs. Kaisman, if you don't want to complete this transaction, I can find someone else. If you just want to humiliate me and tease me, then forgive me." Before he finished speaking, a man with the same long golden hair appeared. The ponytailed woman strode in, and her words stopped when she saw Garen. "You are," she frowned delicately. "Blantine." Garen turned around and looked at this big shot who once supported him and finally gave up on him. The big shot back then has not changed much now. His clothes look simple, but they are all the most expensive ones. The bead chain on her wrist alone is worth hundreds of thousands of universal points. Galen smiled. It was obvious that he was just a small character back then and was not worthy of Blanding's mind. "My name is Nono Siwalin. I wonder if Miss Blanding still remembers this name." Nono Siwalin, Blanding, as a master of consciousness, naturally has a strong enough memory. High-energy fuel powder, she subconsciously remembered a business that she had benefited from. "Yeah, that's it." Garen laughed. "Are you still alive?" Blanding was slightly shocked. However, when he looked at Garen at this moment, he saw that he had no consciousness at all. It was obvious that he had suffered a severe injury that year, and his consciousness could not be restored at all. Her originally surprised expression suddenly returned to normal. "It turns out to be Nyanyo." She swept the golden hair from her cheek elegantly. "I'm very sorry about what happened with your parents back then." "Are you sorry?" Garen shook his head. "It doesn't matter. I am largely responsible for what happened back then. As long as you understand." Blanding nodded. If it weren't for the close relationship between Inari and this man, she wouldn't bother to pay attention to a guy who has lost all consciousness. Then Inari, "Mrs. Kaisman, please give me a letter. This business is very important to me, you should know." "Importance is relative." Inari glanced at Garen and then responded with an elegant gesture. "But my conditions remain unchanged. You should know that I have made a lot of concessions." Garen calmly watched the two women bargaining, but in the end it was Inari who was impatient because of Garen. After quickly reaching an agreement, Blanding suddenly showed a smile of victory and turned around to leave. "By the way, Lord Blanding, you just said that you regret what happened with my parents back then?" "I brought it upon myself for what happened to me, but what does this have to do with my parents?" Galen suddenly asked, when Blanding was about to leave. Blanding's steps that had just turned around paused for a moment, then turned around again, looking at Garen with a puzzled look on her face. He looked at Inari again, who had a frightened face. "When the leader of the Black Annihilation faction fell, your teacher and I were assigned to defend the main battleship. But we didn't expect that energy abnormalities would cause earthquakes, and accidents would occur in the safest underground air defense facilities. This is something we can't. What comes to mind is also an unexpected surprise." She frowned. "So, although I'm sorry for the death of your family, to be honest, It's not our fault, Blanding frowned, we have done everything we should do. Garen looked startled. Blanding's last words finally revealed the doubts he had always had in an instant. It seemed that Blanding was still saying something else, but he couldn't hear it clearly. In that last sentence, this short line about the death of your family members was repeated over and over again, as if the echoes in the valley were constantly vibrating and replaying in my mind. Brantine's frown deepened. She quietly stared at the sudden appearance of Nono Sivalin, feeling that something was wrong with this person. I remember, your story caused a sensation in the domain. The former genius of the Black Annihilation sect was rounded up and disappeared, and his whereabouts are unknown. Later, the case was overturned and it was proved that you were wrongly accused by a traitor, she said calmly. Okay, if there's nothing else to do, I'll leave first. Blanding doesn't want to waste her time on an irrelevant person. The original technology is nothing new. The military no longer restricts high-energy fuel powder, and the market is far less big than it used to be. Now this level of technology everywhere, the military opens restrictions to maximize productivity. But what we are facing now is not a technical problem but a lack of resources. The sound of Blanding leaving suddenly woke Galen up. His expression was calm, but the inexplicable emotion flashing in his eyes was obviously not as quiet as he appeared on the surface. During the earthquake, was there a way to check the genetic tissue? He suddenly said in a low voice. Inali nodded quickly, like a chicken pecking at rice, not daring to disobey in the slightest. Perhaps she was the only one in the entire Black Pan territory who knew best how terrifying the man in front of her was. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 1089. There are also cemeteries near Black Pan City, but in front of several of them, a group of men in black clothes are standing in front of them. Regardless of whether they were men or women, all the people in this group were dressed in plain black, and several of the women even wore black gauze hats to express their condolences. It was obvious that someone in the family had died. One of the women had golden curly hair. Even a black gauze hat could not hide her beautiful face and plump and graceful figure. From time to time, the surrounding men would quietly pay attention and salute. Garen stood in front of the cemetery, and his consciousness instantly penetrated the ground. He immediately felt that there were 3 corpses buried deep in the ground that had mostly rotted. The skeletons of 2 middle-aged men and women and a young girl. As consciousness wrapped around them, a small strand of hair from 3 of them slowly emerged from the soil. The hair was still intact and showed no signs of decay. Kneeling down, Garen reached out and grabbed 3 strands of hair. At the same time, he also removed a strand of hair and handed it over to the 2 inspectors in black behind him. Various expensive testing instruments have been placed on the ground behind them. Several professionals respectfully put the hair strands into 4 different jars with gloves and began the delicate genetic verification and testing process. In just over 10 minutes, the test results came out. "Madam, my lord," the examiner whispered, "judging from the genetic match, the 3 corpses buried here are indeed your former relatives. There is no doubt about this." "You sure?" The air seemed to become much colder all of a sudden. The inspector felt a little chilly for no reason, but he didn't understand what was going on at all, so he nodded fiercely. "I am very sure that any inspection agency can easily come up with this result without any doubt. The wind is getting colder and colder." Garen's face became colder and colder. Although he didn't have much affection for his parents and relatives in this body, he had promised Nono to take care of them, but now he failed to do so. He waved. "You leave first." Inari nodded and left silently with several inspectors. Everyone could see that Garen was in a very bad mood now. Garen took out a small white handheld computer-like thing, which was the most advanced communication device of the Chixu sect. He skillfully dialed a number and quickly turned off the positioning and video functions here. Not long after, there was a response from the other side. "Galen? Why can't you see anything in the darkness over there?" Xylan's voice came from the video. He still looks the same as before, with short green hair and a slightly raised mouth with a hint of indifference. She was wearing what seemed to be some kind of standard clothing, all in white, and she looked extremely heroic. My area was suddenly blocked and the signal wasn't very good, Garen replied casually. How are you doing? Are you okay? It's okay. My power is getting stronger now, but I always feel that some places are not very smooth. Do you still have some of the ore you gave me last time? It's the kind of black-red metal ore. There has always been a dispute between Xylan and Garen. It's so rude. Of course, I'll send you as much as you want, Garen smiled, speaking softly, but there was a hint of deep coldness deep in his eyes. By the way, how are my mother and the others? Are they doing well now? I haven't gone back to see them in so many years. Now that I think about it, I am really unfilial. I plan to go back and have a look. Please send me the specific address. Bar. Xylan suddenly showed an indifferent expression. They have just moved now, and they may not be sure of the address for the time being. If you want to come out, you'd better inform me first. The Central Star territory is not so easy to get there. I can get you a pass through my teacher's relationship. But you are now that you are a master of mechanics, it should be easy to handle, but can you block the Stargate and get out? It can work out, I have a way, Garen replied with a smile. By the way, your mother wants to talk to you, you tell her yourself. I just dialed the phone number to communicate. Xylan suddenly showed an inexplicable smile, the screen closed with a snap, and quickly switched to another one that looked like small garden place background. The gentle face of Mother Emeranda appears in the center of the picture. No. Yes, I am. Are your mother, sister, and father okay? I plan to come back and have a look after some time, Garen answered with a soft voice. No, you are the backbone of our family. Our career is important. We are all living a good life. Don't worry. It's just that there has been no news about your brother. If you have news about him someday, remember to inform us immediately, even if you just know about him. It's enough to be alive. Mother Emeranda spoke softly, wiping tears from time to time. While Garen was talking to his mother about family matters, he listened to her keep talking about Xylan's good qualities. Watching his mother greeting her in the video, Galen consciously stared at his mother's broken and decaying body at his feet. Garen suddenly felt an indescribable chill rising from the bottom of his heart. A person who has been dead for more than 3 years is still talking and laughing with me on the video screen? After all, who is real? Over the years, in order to repay Xylan's kindness in taking care of his family, he kept sending all the spare resources he had to him, going back and forth, and he didn't know how many things he sent. Every time he saw a video call from his family to report that they were safe, he felt that he was right with Nono, but he did not delve into other possible answers. Okay, I still have something to do here, let's talk about it later. After Galen and his mother dealt with it for a while, the murderous intention in his heart became increasingly unsuppressible, and he quickly disconnected the phone. In the final analysis, it was because I did not recognize them as family from the bottom of my heart that this result occurred. Garen knew the root cause in his heart. After all, if I could just pay a little more attention after all this time. Only now did he recall that even he couldn't see clearly what bottom line a woman like Xylan, who was willing to give up almost everything in pursuit of power, could achieve. How long had their friendship lasted for her to be so desperate to help her? There are also the White King's pieces hidden in this area. As the White King who can see the thread of fate, will he let the Red King develop without any worries about the Red King who can compete with him in the future? This possibility is impossible even to think about. When the energy tide appears, it is when dark chess appears, because then, the forbidden parts of the Red King will truly appear with the tide. No longer suppressing the killing intent in his heart, Garen looked back at Inari, and his figure instantly disappeared into the air. Immediately, Everyone felt a cold wind rising into the sky and flying towards the distance. Aurora Realm Titan City. Galen floated quietly in the sky, overlooking the entire bustling white city. Titan City is the area where all the nobles in the Aurora region are concentrated. It is also where the largest and most powerful force, White Light, is located. Although it is not the capital, it is one of the most prosperous cities in the Aurora region. Especially after most of the Black Oblivion sect was destroyed, the original Aurora domain was defeated and surrendered, and has now been assigned to the White Light organization as a base. A large number of spaceships of various sizes were flowing over the city, and ground convoys were flowing in and out. Occasionally, some mecha teams could be seen patrolling the entire city. The entire Titan City is like the most sophisticated instrument, extremely complicated and gorgeous, completely different from the decadent and cold atmosphere of the Black Pan territory. Garen was suspended in the air and slowly stretched out his hand, as if he wanted to completely hold the entire city in his palm. Nothing in the world can escape the fate of death after all, he murmured, and the black clouds in the sky became more and more hovering. Countless clouds surged crazily, filled with immeasurable white cold air, and turned into a terrifying huge hand. The giant hand slowly pressed down, pressing towards Titan City in the air. Which senior came to our Titan City? I am the City Lord White Shark. For the sake of the holy light of the Aurora domain, please stop your anger for the time being. A white mecha with a shark head soared into the sky. He stood up, carrying a legacy-level momentum all over his body, with a green crystal clearly embedded in the middle of his chest, which was obviously the same style as the original White Light mecha. The entire force field of the mecha condensed into one, turning into a giant white shark that resembled reality, soaring into the sky to meet the giant hand in the sky. Senior, please show mercy, the city lord roared loudly. There was already a lot of chaos in the city below. A large number of spaceships and vehicles were blocked, and the traffic was in chaos. Countless people began to panic, causing even greater chaos. A large number of people in the city huddled together. It only took a short moment for the city's order to collapse. Quietly looking at the huge city below, Garen closed his eyes. Let all things wither. He held out his hand lightly. History freezes. Peng. The giant hand composed of cold air suddenly collapsed and turned into countless white air swooping down. A huge amount of cold air poured down like raindrops, and everything they touched was quickly covered with a light layer of white frost, and then completely immersed in solid ice. The white cold air like rain passed by the shark mecha, and no matter how hard he struggled, it was to no avail. Ah! The shark mecha rushed toward Garen crazily. He pulled out a huge folding scythe with both hands and drew a crescent-like white light in mid-air. Dang! The huge scythe, which was tens of meters long, was blocked by Garen's raised index finger. The terrifying momentum seemed to disappear out of thin air, completely inconsistent with the laws of physics. Why? As countless layers of ice spread rapidly along the scythe and onto the shark mecha, he finally struggled to say a word. Then the whole person was completely frozen into ice and fell from a high altitude. Within 3 days, hand over the defectors of the Black Oblivion section. Those who disobey the order will fall into eternal sleep just like the city. Garen's figure was blurred in the sky, but his low and clear words were not missed at all. Transmitted to the screens of various monitoring forces. Crack. After a moment of distortion, Galleon disappeared in mid-air. The originally bustling city was completely frozen in the ice before it could even reflect. Far away in the capital city of Aurora, a spacious and empty dark conference room. The leaders sitting around the round table looked at the city that was completely frozen in the picture, silent. The white-haired man sitting in the main seat had gloomy eyes and crossed his fingers on the table. He was wearing a black suit with silver stripes. To this extent he spoke slowly, his voice dry. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 1090. I need you to come up with an emergency plan, the man sitting in the main seat said in a low voice. That's a city, and Titan City is one of our most important bases. We can't just be trapped and frozen. This man was the boss of the White Light organization, the destroyer who took revenge on the Black Disk realm. Now he has become the new leader of the Aurora realm after completely defeating the Aurora realm. Those present here are either the original royal nobles of the Aurora domain, a group of his former subordinates, and the subordinates of the Black Oblivion sect who rebelled. At this time, the Black Annihilation sect and others were the most embarrassed, and others turned their attention to them intentionally or unintentionally. Everyone from the Black Annihilation sect, tell me, how did this person come about? An Aurora royal family member said calmly. This kind of strength belongs to a master who will not fall down. I don't believe you don't know how to provoke such a master. Indeed, even if the boss wants to protect you, you have to figure out the cause and effect, another person said with a smile. That is a master who will not fall down and can be compared with the leader of the Black Annihilation sect back then. For a time, all the leaders' attention was focused on the Black Annihilation faction and others. As the representative, the Fourth Wind God General sat in his seat with a stern expression and said nothing. Next to him was a young woman with long red hair. The silence of the Black Annihilation sect made the others gloat over their misfortune. Okay, got it, let's talk about this. What's going on? The leading man also set his sights on the Fourth Wind God General. General Feng Shen cleared his throat and looked around, expressionless. Dear Lord Holy Light, we have never seen this person before, and we dare not lie to you about this. The Fourth Wind God can ignore other people, but he cannot treat him the same way. He stood up and answered solemnly. It's impossible for such a master who doesn't fall down to the next level to appear suddenly, right? Holy Light was a little displeased. In my opinion, now is not the time to worry about this person's origin, but the time to protect the reputation of our Aurora domain. If a domain is intimidated into submission by a terrorist who suddenly comes to the door, it will be a joke to all other domains. An old man said in a low voice. We must issue a joint terrorist attack letter immediately. Notify other domains to join forces. Titan City is our most critical trading city for importing star core fragments. There is no room for error, someone said firmly. After a brief shock, everyone realized that since that person was so arrogant and ignored millions of lives and deaths in the entire city, he could definitely treat him as the biggest mutant biological threat and issue an emergency announcement to unite experts from all other domains. No matter how strong he is alone, can he be stronger than all of us? A leader sneered. Although it's nothing to be afraid of if you don't fall down, I can't be easily dispatched. It seems that I can only trouble you since the great revenge of the Black Pan domain was avenged. The Holy Light's mood has become much calmer. It was quite calm at this time. My guess is that this person took advantage of the change in the weather and the greatly increased power of his ice ability to amplify his strength. In fact, his strength should not be too strong. After all, if he was strong enough, he would have been able to do it earlier. I jumped out instead of waiting until now, an old man analyzed calmly. Rational. Then we will dispatch 12 great light mechas. In order to prevent being attacked from east to west, I will be stationed in the capital. Bailu and Guangheng, you guys will go there together. The Holy Light took out a pure white disc and handed it to a leader who stood up. This disc stores one of my half-powerful shots, and I leave it to you to deal with as the pinnacle of non-degraded masters. The Holy Light had killed one-on-one including the leader of the Black Annihilation sect and the dean of the Black Pan Academy. Of course, he didn't care at all about the two below who didn't fall below the limit. At the same time, go up to the headquarters to inquire about the man's information. The headquarters he was talking about was the Artificial Intelligence headquarters jointly created by Maria Domain and Luoyang Domain, which collected the most comprehensive and large amount of various information. "Don't worry, leave it to us," the young man who took the disc grinned and showed his white teeth. "If the strength that does not fall down is spread out, and combined with the snow and cold air in the sky, the result will be so terrifying and deeply rooted in people's hearts. Titan City is frozen, and the ice cannot be broken at all. Once broken, the people inside will be completely shattered together." Garen vented his anger and somewhat relieved the murderous intention in his heart. He is currently waiting on a barren grassland in the radiation zone between the Aurora realm and the Black Disk realm. In the distance ahead was the mysterious and strange number 7 ruins. He had gone in before and almost couldn't get out. From a distance, the current ruins of number 7 are still the same as before, abandoned and dilapidated, with stage props and factory-like machines everywhere mixed in. There was an indescribable awkwardness in the air. Garen did not show up, but hid in the air, completely covering himself with optical invisibility and breath wave isolation devices. This was something he specially prepared when he came back this time, just to wait for the moment when Klin and others returned. "Master, Bominant has been found. Do I need to take you there immediately?" Turing's voice came from beside him. "Walk." Garen casually threw a small black ball out of his hand, letting it fall freely into the soil on the ground, and automatically drilled deep into the soil. Then he turned around and left. Xylan deceived him. Bayman also wanted to assassinate him, but was seriously injured by the 9-headed dragon soul seed that automatically rebounded. This revenge must be avenged. It just so happens that the preparations for the main business here are completed, and this free time is just enough to settle all the past grievances. Anyway, there should still be some time before the energy tide explodes. Garen's eyes glowed with a faint blue light. He will not touch Xylan for the time being. He must wait until her specific address is determined before dealing with it. Now that he thinks about it, she should have taken away all his resources in the first place. This is the person he has seen in several consecutive worlds who can tell the most powerful lies. Following Turing's guidance, Garen quickly passed through the radiation zone, silently entered the protective light curtain, and returned to the Black Disk domain. Flying to a mountainous area in the wild with ease. Soon a large white house built on the top of the mountain appeared in view. There are also many guards placed around the house, holding firearms and wearing micro-mechas, and they appear to be heavily guarded. Garen's approach immediately attracted the attention of these people. It seems that they sensed it through some instrument. You must know that Galen has the most advanced instrument to make it invisible. Inside the garden of the big house, Ba Meng Ant was following a woman with a slightly flattering look on his face, saying something with a smile on his face. The woman was wearing a black dress that hugged her body, revealing her beautiful figure. She had phoenix eyes and was a rare beauty. "Don't worry, the materials promised to you will be delivered as soon as possible, but the potion you prepare must also be delivered on time." Of course, it is also an honor for me, Bayman Ant, that the eldest lady comes here in person this time. Being able to lead the eldest lady to visit the Black Disk territory together is a blessing that many people can't imagine, Bayman Ant replied with a smile. "As long as you know, if you serve me well, you will benefit from it. If you don't serve me well, you know the consequences," the woman sneered. "I understand," Bayman Ant replied quickly. "This is the 3-domain joint mecha competition." Before he could finish his words, he suddenly felt a somewhat abnormal aura suddenly penetrate the defense layer of the house and shoot directly towards the two of them. Suddenly, he felt a deep sense of crisis, and an extremely terrifying killing intent surged toward him. In his field of vision, a white light suddenly shot out from the distant sky, heading straight towards him. Hiss! The sharp whistling sound caused by the white light stung his eardrum severely. But at this moment, he didn't have time to think too much. He shook his hands and quickly threw out 2 mechanical boxes, from which 2 ferocious black beasts rushed out to face the white light. Ouch! The 2 ferocious beasts couldn't see clearly what species they were. As soon as they rushed forward, they were easily penetrated by the white light. The speed of the white light did not slow down and it rushed directly towards Bayman Ant. Garen was in the white light with a calm expression. For him now, killing him was just a matter of taking a breath as a mere biochemist Bayman Ant. The resistance was no better than tissue paper. Before he could take the initiative to break it, he was naturally oppressed by his own force field and collapsed. "Help!" Bayman Ant shouted with a look of defeat. "Bold!" An angry female voice came from the side. At the same time, a step faster than the sound was a dark red steel wheel, with a sharp edge with jagged edges, and it cut directly towards Garen's neck in an instant. Garen casually stretched out his finger to point at the wheel. Boom! Countless red lights burst out, and the entire house and garden were instantly shrouded in intense red. All flowers, branches, and plants quickly withered and rotted. The red light impact contaminated the micromechas that had just rushed into the house, and immediately threw these people away. It was corroded by the red light in mid-air and no longer made any sound. "Huh!" Garen let out a soft cry, and when he reappeared, he had landed lightly on top of the wall, looking down at the cold-faced woman below and Bayman Ant hiding behind her. Just now he reached out and touched the wheel, and there was a strange force that wanted to teleport him to another area instantly. Fortunately, he controlled the wave to avoid this teleportation, and landed lightly on the wall not far away. "It's interesting." He stared at the red wheel in the woman's hand and seemed to be interested in it. "You actually dare to attack my princess's servants? Come here. Capture this guy who breaks in and disturbs my pleasure." The surroundings were quiet, and Garen looked at the woman with interest. "Your physique is very interesting." He touched his chin and seemed to be more interested. "Originally I just came here to settle a small matter, but I didn't expect that I would get something unexpected. It's not bad." The sound was still floating in the air, and Garen's men instantly turned into white light and rushed towards the two of them. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 1091. Protect the Princess. A series of hoarse voices sounded from the darkness. A figure suddenly burst out of the house. With a huge momentum, he punched Garen in the air. This is extremely pure power, without any impurities. Dang! Garen's fist was casually moved, and then flew backwards like a cannonball. The person exploded into a ball of plasma before he even hit the ground. "It's the Mechanic Master. Stop him!" "Red Net," an old voice sounded in the air. Layers of complex red energy barriers appeared out of thin air between the woman and Garen. Garen stretched out his hand, as if he didn't see the barrier at all. With a buzz, dozens of layers of barriers were instantly broken, like paper. Garen's right hand passed through easily and grabbed the woman's neck. At this moment, a red laser dropped from the sky. Laugh! The huge column-like laser directly illuminated the entire night sky. It was a terrifying beam of destruction ejected from the bottom of a huge black warship. It was an energy cannon specially used to attack enemy warships. At this moment, someone is actually using it as a weapon to attack people. Such accuracy is simply shocking. The beam of light connecting the sky and the earth suddenly fell to the ground, and everything was plunged into a complete red light. At the moment when the light beam just fell, there was a muffled thunder, and a beam of light that was more terrifying than the red laser beam rose into the sky and hit the black battleship hard. The battleship seemed to be stabbed hard in the abdomen by a giant red stick. It paused for a moment, and then exploded in an instant, turning into a large number of fragments and gliding towards the ground. Garen dispersed the ice mirror in his hand. "Tisk, tisk, it's so dangerous, I almost got hit." He held the woman's neck with one hand, dragged her casually like cargo, and looked towards the sky. Watching the huge black battleship fall hard, many people on top jumped out frantically to escape, turning into parachutes and falling from the sky. "Young man, do you know the identity of the person you are holding in your hand, an old man with a red beard appeared in front of Garen out of thin air, standing on the ruins, dressed in black, giving people a mysterious and strange look. "Feel. You dare to touch a hair on my head, I will kill your whole family," the woman in her hand cursed loudly and viciously like a crazy trapped animal. Boom. A mass of substantial cold energy emerged from Garen's side. It was a tall and ferocious two-headed wolf, and it was Turing who came one step behind. The terrifying eternal light covering his body covered the entire courtyard. For a moment, the old man wanted to speak, but was so severely oppressed by this pressure that he couldn't even make a sound. His face suddenly became extremely ugly. "Lord, these people dare to threaten you, who is extremely sacred. Why don't you let your subordinates eat all the nutrients that have turned into the earth?" Turing complimented loudly, while staring at Galen's hand with extremely greedy eyes. The woman looked. It seemed that was the unusual deliciousness that attracted him the most. "We are from the Crimson Palace. As a master who does not fall down, you should know this name, right?" The old man mustered up all his strength before he managed to make a sound. "Please, for the Red King's sake. Let him kill me. My father will avenge me. Let him kill me," the woman in black roared loudly. "How dare you make me so embarrassed?" Crimson Palace, Garen frowned and immediately knew the origin of the other party. "Are you a biochemist?" He immediately thought of the other party's identity. The Crimson Palace is the single largest organization of biochemists. As a biochemist, it is normal for Bayman to be related to these people. He looked at Bayman beside him. This man was so scared that he collapsed on the ground. He looked stupidly frightened. A small part of his legs were burned off by the red laser that just fell from the sky. At this moment, can't even stand up. Interesting. Are biochemists also participating in this grand event? A strange smile appeared on Garen's face. The Crimson Palace is a force that will be regained by Klin sooner or later in the future. I didn't expect to encounter it here in advance. The princess in his hands must be the future wife who will become the queen, and be accidentally fell in love with Klin, but she was much more mature at that time and not as immature as she is now. This makes me very embarrassed. In order not to affect the general situation, Garen originally planned to kill this woman, but now he found that it seemed impossible. This was the wife of the future Red King. It would be bad if she killed her and affected the general trend of history. The princess in her hand was still cursing loudly, her voice mixed with all kinds of unpleasant words. Her physique is immune to any energy-based suppression effects, and only substantial physical attacks can deal with her. This kind of physique is obviously not innate, but is prepared by the biochemists themselves. Since it can't be killed, then... Bang! Garen raised the princess in his hand and smashed it to the ground. The cement splashed and shattered, and a large number of rocks were smashed in all directions. Bang bang bang! One after another, Garen grabbed the princess and smashed her in hard places, randomly. The courtyard, which was already in tatters due to the impact of the red light, was finally completely smashed to pieces. The walls were broken and collapsed, and the ground was pitted. I swear, bang. Must, bang. Kill, bang. You, bang. Ah, boom. A large amount of gravel and soil fell around like raindrops. The old man clenched his fists in pain, but was suppressed by the eternal light and could not move at all. He could only watch as Garen abused the princess wantonly. As the sound stopped suddenly, everything was finally quiet. The princess's neck was weirdly twisted to one side, and she didn't know if she was still alive. But no matter what, Garen felt that his body and mind were indeed much more comfortable. Holding the princess like a tattered rag doll in his hand, he walked up to Bayman, who was completely stunned and paralyzed on the ground in fear. Are you, the one from back then? Bayman finally recognized Garen and pointed at him, his voice stammering and unable to speak clearly. You finally recognized it, Garen smiled. I'm here to settle what happened at the beginning. Bominant's pupils shrank. No, it's none of my business. I just made a deal with them, it's none of my business. It's Ice Dragon. It's him. It's Fila. It's them who made a deal with me to kill you. No. No. Don't kill me. Don't. Click. Garen crushed his chest with one kick, which was a neat move. No, it's not my fault. Bominant opened his eyes wide and refused to close his eyes. He tilted his head to one side and was finally speechless. This is the end of it, Garen breathed out, recalling the state he was in when he was plotted against by this man in the hospital, the seventh wind god General Fira. These two are the real masterminds. Let's go touring. He turned and walked outside. The two-headed werewolf responded in a low voice with some reluctance, but still followed Garen obediently. By the way, I'll give this back to you. Garen suddenly remembered that he was holding someone in his hand and threw it to the old man. You're welcome. The old man quickly caught the princess and checked her. Although there was no danger of life, her whole body was in terrible shape. He was so angry that he almost vomited blood. Seeing Garen's back to him, defenseless, he instinctively wanted to take action, but as soon as he saw it, he almost vomited blood. As soon as he moved, he spat out a mouthful of blood. He felt like his internal organs were being cut by a knife, and the cramping pain was unbearable. It was obvious that he had been plotted unknowingly in the previous confrontation. Your Excellency. What happened today will be repaid in the future. Don't you dare leave your name. He mustered up all his strength and shouted loudly. No one answered him. Garen jumped away as soon as he left, not even bothering to talk nonsense with this man. A mere inheritance level. The snow in the sky is getting heavier and heavier. Some places were covered with thick layers of snow, and 1 foot could sink into the ground up to the knee when walking on the ground. Garen and Turing stood on the cliff at the top of a mountain range, looking down at the huge white city in the basin, which was larger than Titan City. This is where Phyla and the seventh wind god will live after they defected, the capital of the Aurora domain, Aurora City. There are masters here who will never fall behind, Garen said in admiration. It is also the location of the highest level of military force on the home planet. Philadelphia and the seventh wind god general are here. Recalling the tragic situation when I was blocked by my whole body consciousness, if it hadn't been for the sixth wind god general to save me, I would have been destroyed directly. I can't wait to return this great gift to you. Garen looked at the huge capital below, his eyes calm, and he didn't know what he was thinking. My friend came to Aurora City, but he didn't notify me as the host. Isn't that rude? Suddenly, a calm man's voice came from behind Garen. Garen turned around and saw a person walking forward slowly, but his body jumped a long distance like a flash, and appeared a few meters in front of him from hundreds of meters away. This man exudes an inexplicable power. His eternal light is as white as jade, which is completely different from Galen's white color with a hint of coldness. Judging from the fluctuations in this man's body, he is also not downgraded. As a non-degraded person, he has been able to fuse the unique mecha with his own part. He is even powerful enough to disassemble the mecha and rematch it to form a kind of mecha that is completely integrated with himself. Space weapon concept. On the surface, he looks like an ordinary person, but in fact he possesses extremely terrifying force. Who are you? The moment Garen turned around, he suddenly felt the trace of blood energy remaining in his body jump hard. At the moment when the energy jumped, the other party's expression seemed to change drastically, and he looked at himself in disbelief. Unexpectedly, all the eternal light on the man's body suddenly shrank, and his whole person became inexplicably defenseless. He waved his hand and spread out a large ray of light, sealing everything around him. Snapped. This city lord, who had not been demoted, the current controller of the Aurora realm, actually knelt down on one knee in front of Garen. The envoy is here in person, but I couldn't greet him right away. "I apologize," he said loudly and respectfully with fear. "Messenger," Garen was shocked. His other identity is the body snatcher Jalius, and now in the Aurora realm, the former leader of the White Light terrorist organization actually calls himself Sir. In just an instant, all the relationships were connected. Carthage Shinandi. What a great gesture. Looking at the sacred light kneeling in front of him, Garen sneered in his heart. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 1092. If Garen remembered correctly, the White Light organization should have plundered the Black Disk territory many years ago. Unexpectedly, their leader had been the foreshadowing laid by Carthage and others. From this point of view, Bai Guang's search for forbidden mecha parts back then may have clearly pointed at Qiyu. It's not like the original White Light was a start-up organization, but it targeted Qiyu as soon as it appeared. Maybe they were tracking Qiyu's components very early on. Garen connected all the situations in one go. Looking at the sacred light kneeling in front of him, the King of White didn't know how long he had been planning, but he actually put everything in place so early. Now it seems that the chess piece next to the Red Moon King is probably the man in front of him. Needless to say, I want to see those people who rebelled against the Black Oblivion section. Since you are also part of the plan, hand them all over and I can let you go, Garen replied calmly. Sacred Light, who was kneeling on one knee, had a slight sweat on his forehead. Everything under my command is given by the headquarters, so naturally I follow the arrangements of the envoy. It's just what? The divine light raised its head. Can you please tell the messenger your name so that I can inform the puppet master I belong to? Puppet master? Galen's heart moved. He followed Carthage to get involved in the inside story, but what about the puppet master? It may be the person in charge of the mother planet here. Perhaps he has the same identity as Carthage in the Chixu sect. However, the energy tide is coming, and everything else has to be put on the sidelines. Let's settle the original grudges first. My name is G. Liasi. Are you using the puppet master to suppress me? Before Garen could move, Turing suddenly appeared next to him, exuding an eternal light and suppressing the sacred light. I don't dare. Holy Light quickly lowered his head. Garen was a little impatient, and the delay was a little too long. I'll give you 10 minutes. If you don't surrender, then destroy it. He shifted his gaze from a distance and looked at the entire Aurora city. From here, the entire city is within his field of vision. Aren't you afraid of destroying the headquarters plan? Holy Light gritted his teeth and lowered his head. Plan. Garen glanced sideways at him. Laugh. A ray of white energy shot out suddenly, hitting the sacred light-faced door directly. The sacred light reached out to grab it, and a huge force field instantly condensed in the palm of his hand. Unexpectedly, the white energy turned it around, bypassed his palm and stabbed him in the back of the head. Dang! The sacred light condensed into the shape of a huge white metal bell around the person. The white air hit the outside of the clock and made a loud sound. A trace of cracks suddenly appeared on the surface of the white clock. Lord Messenger, he shouted urgently. Aren't you afraid of Mr. Puppet Master's questioning? He was shocked and angry. He didn't expect that Garen would suddenly take action. He quietly crushed a tiny capsule in his fist. An invisible wave instantly penetrated into the counter space, directly spanning countless distances and transmitted to another place. Garen didn't notice it at all. He calmly stared at the man in front of him. Question? I, G. Liasi, never need to explain to anyone. He suddenly stretched out his hand, crossed a large distance like lightning, and grabbed the head of the holy light with a bang. Ah! The holy light struggled, and the eternal light force field between the two people violently rubbed and collided. However, as a large amount of extremely cold white air spread from Garen's arms, the holy light's struggle gradually slowed down, and the whole person began to fall into an absolute freezing. Hiss! A large amount of cold air enveloped the entire body of the holy light, leaving only one head exposed. He is also not downgraded, but Garen used the power of the red snow ice armor this time. The force field fluctuations that broke out in an instant reached 8 levels. Facing the powerful freezing energy that surpassed his own level by a level, the sacred light could not stand it at all. There is no resistance. Layers of silver-white metal shells gradually appeared all over his body. It was the mecha fused inside his body that wanted to be released to break through the shackles, but to no avail. The cold kept eroding his body and even his soul. There was a clicking sound of freezing, and the sound of the ice spreading gradually thickened. The entire person of the holy light slowly fell into confusion, and his eyes became a little confused. Garen imitated the character of Jaelius in his memory, with a ferocious and evil smile on his face. "Anyone who resists me will die." Boom! A white figure slammed into Garen's left side and was severely blocked by the force field barrier, suspended in the air. The huge power continued to wear away the defense of the Gallian force field, stirring up large pieces of white debris and scattering them. This man's eyes were completely blue, with no eyeballs or pupils, as if his body was completely filled with blue light. He was dressed in black, and his hair was like that of the mythical Medusa. All of them were silver-white mechanical snakes that were still twisting. "This is my territory in G-Liac," the snake-haired man opened his mouth and made a metallic voice. Neither male nor female, but with a subtle echo, very deep. "Go back to your Dragon Emperor star." "Get out," Garen showed an even more ferocious smile, "you told me to get out." In an instant, he punched out like lightning, and his fist gathered countless white energy fields and hit the snake-haired man on the front of the head. Boom! There was a loud thunder-like sound, and the air shook with huge ripples, spreading in all directions. The snake-haired man was punched in the face, and his whole head was sunk in. Then a huge and violent force rushed out, sending his body flying upside down like a rocket. "Go out." With a swish, it hit the ground in the distance. "Jaelios, don't go too far." The snake-haired man was actually not dead. He floated up from the hole in the ground as if he was completely fine. The dented head actually quickly and automatically recovered and returned to its original state. He roared madly at Garen. "Is it Unio gold? Restored metal? The ingredients on your body are really good." Garen was slightly startled, and then showed an even happier smile. "It just so happens that I need this kind of metal for my 9th level body tempering technique. I didn't even think of where to find it, but someone came to my door specially. Don't think I'm afraid of you. Jaelios, if you go too far, I'll report it to the headquarters." The snake-haired man roared loudly, but he seemed a bit strong on the outside. He took a step back, obviously preparing to find a way out. "Report it?" "It's up to you," Garen said nonchalantly. As long as the 9th level body tempering technique can be improved, based on his current basic physical fitness, the 9th level body tempering technique can enhance his physique enough on this basis. Although his current physique can no longer be improved due to the limit of his soul. However, after this body tempering technique is completed, a layer of mysterious force field that looks like a substance can be formed on the outside. This layer of force field is like a crystal and can be naturally covered outside the body anytime and anywhere, providing the practitioner with extremely powerful qualities. This is actually a way to use external objects to integrate into a stronger self. Freeze! Turing suddenly grabbed the snake-haired man from behind, and the huge power of the eternal light suppressed him for a moment. At this moment, Galen's cold air spread over it, freezing it completely in the blink of an eye and entering a solid mass of ice. Kaka! The top of the ice mass slowly capped, and there was no longer any gap. Garen strolled up to the snake-haired man. 139 kinds of metals, wow, this set of mecha dolls is really valuable. The core of it is silver yao gold and shooting 0 crystal. It's just enough for me to complete the 2nd level of body tempering technique. He smiled at the snake-haired man in the ice. The frozen creatures were still conscious, but they could not move. The snake-haired man clearly showed anger and fear in his eyes. The biggest purpose of Garen's return this time is the energy tide, and the second is to repay the original grudge. With the experience of the Chi Snow ice armor, his Chi Snow skill no longer has any bottlenecks. As long as he has enough energy to absorb it, he can improve it in a very short time. But the trouble is that the energy required is too huge. Even if all the energy of a planet is swallowed up, it may not be able to meet his needs to be promoted to the 18th level of Chixu. Moreover, swallowing energy ores still requires digestion time. Even if his peacock skill reaches its peak, it is unlikely that he will be able to accumulate all the required energy without spending more than 10 years devouring energy ores. Therefore, Garen, who had seen the trend before, immediately set his sights on the energy tide. This naturally triggered pure energy tide is the easiest thing for him to digest and absorb. It can be converted into pure energy in a short period of time and quickly increase the level of Chixyugong. But such a tidal explosion can only be achieved under some special stimulation. This kind of stimulation is not controlled by people at all, and can only be encountered by chance. Among them, only Klin and his team were inspired like this once when they traveled between the Four-Ring Star Alliance and their home planet. This is Galen's true ultimate goal. Utilize the energy tide to reach the pinnacle of the Chixia Kung Fu while condensing soul seeds. Raise new soul limits. Once the energy tide is triggered, it will last for about a few days. During this time, Garen is ready. He has inherited all the experience of countless predecessors. With sufficient energy and the height of his own secret martial arts realm, Garen it is absolutely possible to condense several soul seeds of different secret martial arts in a very short period of time without bottlenecks. This possibility is absolutely true. After all, he had not grasped the rules of soul seed condensation before. In fact, as long as an ordinary top-level secret martial artist practices to the peak, condenses experience and insights, and uses skill as a fusion, it is very likely to reach the realm of soul seed. This is the condensation of the most basic rules of secret martial arts. It is a kind of understanding of the most thorough basic rules. Once it is condensed, it can guide all the cells in the entire body to instinctively improve according to the rules and reach a higher upper limit of physical quality. The goal of this is the fundamental truth behind how soul seeds increase the upper limit of the soul. After inheriting a lot of experience in secret martial arts, Garen understood a lot of truth. It doesn't have to be a secret weapon. As long as it is a top secret weapon, even if it is not powerful enough, as long as it can condense the basic understanding of the basic rules and add enough energy, it can be condensed. Peng. The entire body of the snake-haired man suddenly shattered and turned into countless metal fragments. Various colors and materials were mixed together like a large ball of sticky dye, making it a mess. Garen held his hand with one hand and immediately separated two strands of metal. The energy mark was calculated at high speed. He opened his mouth slightly and sucked lightly. Hiss. Two streams of metal, one black and one white, suddenly turned into liquid and quickly turned into two streams and flew into his mouth. As long as the body tempering technique is improved, my body's resistance will also be improved, and by then I will be able to reach a higher level in disguise to destroy the load of impact fists. This is also the fundamental reason why Garen chose these two secret martial arts in the first place, because they can complement each other. Standing at the top of the mountain, the sacred light was frozen directly in the ice mass, motionless. The snake-haired man was completely decomposed into a large amount of rare metals by Galen, and some of them were selected and collected. The rest were completely devoured by the peacock technique, and turned into the purest cold energy to replenish consumption. Unfortunately, not all rare metals are high-energy materials. Although some metals are rare and precious, they are not precious in terms of high energy. Therefore, these metals, together with the energy furnace in the snake-haired man's body, do not provide much cold energy to Galleon, but only a considerable amount. It's just a high energy mine that has been swallowed, and it will take a while for digestion to be completed. After Garen inhaled the metal, he stood on the top of the mountain and waited quietly. At the same time, he closed his eyes slightly, and his whole body began to faintly emit a black halo. Not long after, a semi-permeable black film appeared on his body. After a while, a layer of white semi-permeable membrane flashed again and disappeared in a flash. The two metals quickly reached the second level of the 9th level body tempering technique. For Garen, who had practiced the God statue Kung Fu before, this kind of body strengthening secret martial arts with the same approach but the same effect was very familiar, and it was very easy to get started. After all, what the 9th level body tempering technique lacks is materials and practice time, not the difficulty of practicing the technique itself. Like Bing Kong Ji, this technique is a water grinding technique that tests one's patience very much. But for Garen, he just clicked on dozens of potential points to completely solve the problem. After he absorbed a large number of holy branches obtained from the Merchant Alliance, his potential points exceeded 1,000 for the first time. It's not as economical to use as it used to be. With the help of materials and potential points, the second level of body tempering technique was completely achieved in just a few minutes. Opening his eyes, Garen clearly felt that his body was covered with a thin film, which seemed to protect his body from contact with the outside world. But it miraculously does not affect one's perception. At the same time, it also greatly increases the defensive ability of one's body. This ability seems to be derived from one's own constitution. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 1093. Garen's own innate physique is extremely terrifying. I am afraid that purely based on his physical body, he should be unmatched by anyone in this world. After all, potential points are in terms of growth. The most terrifying innate body, the body tempering film naturally derived from it, has an unknown level of strength. He tried to stretch out his hand, and the eternal light covered his palm fiercely, and struck the knife with his hand. Bang! The blade of his palm struck his chest, making a dull sound like a leather drum. Without force field defense, Yichengli was unscathed. There was a hint of joy in Garen's eyes. Then slowly increase the force. 20%. Bang! The palm of his hand hit his chest hard. Still okay. 35%, 10%. It took 100% of the attack power to cause Garen to feel some pain. Obviously, the film seemed to be unable to completely filter the force, causing part of the force to penetrate and injure the skin. Amazing. At the second level, I can reach the point where masters of the same level can't hurt myself. Although it is because of my strong enough physique, it is still very scary. Garen's original physique is strong, and the body tempering technique increases it based on the practitioner's own physique. Therefore, it is very beneficial for ethnic groups with innate divine power and strong physiques to practice this. But for everyone in this world, the limit is 20 points of physique, and cannot go higher. However, Gallians are different. At 40 points, they have completely surpassed the category of ordinary people and have reached racial genetic transcendence. And who would practice the secret martial art after reaching the peak like him? After all, although the 9th level body tempering technique is not difficult to cultivate, it takes at least more than 10 years to cultivate the first level. Most people don't practice it at the beginning. There is no way to get started after you are too old. If Garen hadn't had potential talent, he wouldn't have been able to practice the secret martial art despite his age. The wisdom of the predecessors is really incredible. Even he didn't know the defense principles of this secret weapon. The current physical defense strength should be between 60 and 70 points. Garen looked at his status bar. Sure enough, the 9th level body tempering technique has undergone new changes. The secret technique of the Mechanic Master, 9th level body tempering technique, level 2. Increases physical fitness by 8 points. The increase is 40*20% of the current physical fitness. At the same time, the property bar has also undergone new changes. But it's not as big a span as imagined. No Siwalin strength 40, agility 40, constitution 40, add 8, intelligence 35, potential 100, and 13,082% soul limit 40. No longer thinking about it, everything was ready, and the strongest man in Aurora City was frozen beside him. The huge city in front of him had no resistance to him. Only then did Garen turn his attention to the entire Aurora City. At this time, Turing had carefully removed the space equipment from the frozen holy light and respectfully presented it to Garen. "Master, there seems to be something good in here." Garen took it and found a ring and a pair of glasses. "When I penetrated it with my consciousness, I found that the things inside were extremely rich, including large swaths of Xeninge mineral essence, and all kinds of weird mecha parts and weapons. A large number of data disks for storage, as well as some sundries for daily use. Let's get it over with. There's no time to delay here." Garen stretched out his hand, and just like when he was in Titan City, the black clouds in the sky slowly intensified and started to rotate. Countless white gas gathered on his palm, as if his whole arm was smoking. He held his hand towards Aurora City from a distance. Hiss. In an instant, a huge white air arm suddenly emerged from the whirlpool of black clouds in the sky, and the arm slowly pressed downwards in the same direction. "Let everything end with the 30-second Ancestor's unique skill." Garen shook his hand slightly. History freezes. Bang. The huge arm shattered suddenly, turning into countless white cold air falling from the sky, scattered into countless white air raindrops, and fell suddenly. Woo! A shrill alarm sounded. What surprised Garen was that the countless white energy was blocked by a white light curtain with snake patterns. Like a hornet's nest being stirred up, swarms of countless white dots suddenly shot out from the Aurora City. They were batches of pilots manipulating the glorious mechas and shooting towards them. "Destroy the intruders." A cold electronic sound sounded over the city. There was no negotiation, just a naked fight. A large group of white mechas rushed towards the top of the mountain where Garen was with their huge combined consciousness. Before the mecha arrived, large white lasers and cannonballs arrived first. Boom! The violent explosions made a sound, and for a moment the entire top of the mountain where Garen was standing collapsed completely. Countless snowflakes and flames were mixed together, and the soil and gravel were swept up high by the explosion, forming a striking pillar of gray dust. Invisible radio waves flowed and exchanged rapidly in the air. "Enter him first, wait for the high-energy railgun support, and prepare the battleship cannon to recharge. The opponent is a high-energy dangerous creature, at least level 5 or above. Be careful to avoid and keep your distance. The great light will be here soon, everyone, please support us. Prepare the death cannon." In an instant, a dazzling black light fell from the sky, hitting the area where Garen was, completely covering the entire area of several hundred meters. The mountain collapsed. It was severely hit by this cannon from a height of several thousand meters, and it was directly reduced by half. At the same time, the top of the entire mountain was torn apart and divided into 3 huge mountain fragments. They tilted towards the surroundings and were killed by mechas while they were still in the air. Their cannons were smashed into smaller pieces. At this time, the masters in the city also flew out in their own mechas, suspended in the air and looking in the direction of Garan from a distance. The city's defense that can withstand the non-relegation was actually collapsed by the attack just now. "The opponent is the non-relegation," an old man whispered. He was driving a great light mecha, and there were more than 10 others like him. People. The Black Annihilation faction and others were on the other side. The mechas they drove had different shapes, but they all had one thing in common, that is, Their body shells were as smooth as a mirror. That is the unique mecha material of Fengshen General. The 4th Wind God General and the 7th Wind God General, the two masters who rebelled against the sect back then, all drove their own mechas next to each other. The last group of people were 5 heritage-level mechas including Ice Dragon and Phyla. Phyla actually entered the inheritance level in a short period of time, obviously not relying on herself. At this time, everyone's eyes were focused on the destroyed mountains in the distance. Can you detect the movement inside? The old man with the highest leadership position asked in a low voice. It's difficult. The wave radiation is too large and the instrument interference is too strong. A big light mecha behind the old man replied in a low voice. The old man frowned. He glanced at the Black Annihilation faction and the others. The other party said before that they are here for you. Why don't you show your reaction to the trouble you caused? He has always looked down on people who betrayed his organization. People all have bad natures. For the first time, the second time you do something like this, you will feel much less guilty. In other words, if you do it the first time, you are likely to do it the second time or the third time. So he has never trusted these Black Annihilation guys. Beluga, we are just the victims in this matter. Although the other party is here for us on the surface, in fact, the 4th Fengshen General opened his mouth to defend. Besides, what's the use of talking about this now? The fight has already begun. Do you still expect that the other party will stop and make peace after being bombarded so many times? The 7th Wind God General was suspended slightly behind him without saying a word. His life in Baiguang was even worse than his previous life in the Black Pan domain. He had long regretted his rebellion. Unfortunately, there is no turning back. Since having already come through, there is only one way to go. Why is the general leader invisible at this time? Someone asked. Perhaps he went to other places and couldn't come back in time. The old man frowned. But it doesn't matter. Even if the opponent is not downgraded, spreading the power so widely will not pose a threat to us. Each white energy has only level 4 power at most. As long as we don't let him break it one by one. Yes, it should be no problem to hold on until the general leader returns, someone agreed. At this moment, a suffocating and terrifying aura suddenly condensed from the sky above his head. Another giant hand with a diameter of thousands of meters appeared. The huge white energy formed an extremely huge hand, and it fiercely grabbed downwards. Buzz. The huge concussion instantly shook a large number of ordinary people in the city to the point where their ears bleed and they were immediately deafened. The snake pattern film and the giant hand were in a fierce stalemate, making violent vibrations. It only took a moment for it to completely collapse. All the floating mechas around were knocked away by the huge shock, like dust blown by the wind. Above the giant hand, a figure covered in white robes floated quietly. The wind blew his robes loudly and kept fluttering to the left. The white-robed man's eyebrows clearly lit up with a silver V-shaped mark. The mark glowed with a striking halo, like the only light under the entire dark cloud. History. Frozen. A clear and cold voice reached everyone's ears. The giant hand reaches down. Aurora City Underground. A dark shadow sat quietly cross-legged deep in the dark underground palace. At the moment there was a huge wave of chill coming from above. The figure slowly opened his eyes, and a purple halo slowly lit up in his eyes. Geliacy. You push people too hard. A low roar sounded from the figure's body, as if countless bells were ringing at the same time. He suddenly raised his right hand and grabbed the top of his head fiercely. In an instant, countless purple and black shadows in the underground palace gathered crazily into his palm, as if all the airflow and material energy were instantly compressed into the palm of his hand. Boom! The ground in Aurora City was completely shattered. The ground cracked open, and a huge black metal hand thousands of meters wide thrust out, facing the giant palm of white air in the sky. Countless buildings shattered and collapsed under the impact of the giant hand. A large number of people cried and made sounds of fear. Countless air currents swept through, driving a large amount of dust and debris around the Black Hand. Two equally huge terrifying palms collided fiercely. The world stopped for a moment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 1094. The sharp black metal giant hand instantly defeated the white air arm. Countless white energy collapsed and scattered, turning into a huge amount of terrifying airflow that surrounded the giant black metal hand. He wanted to freeze it, but was blocked by a thin black light. Phew! The black hand continued to extend upward, and the huge black body connected behind it slowly emerged from the ground. As the earth cracked open, a body was covered in darkness with sharp barbs everywhere, like a huge human figure covered in hedgehog armor. Roar! The huge human figure looked up to the sky and roared. He was completely black, and his face had no outline of facial features. There was only a big black mouth filled with countless sharp saw teeth. A large amount of dirt, gravel, and bricks were carried by the human figure and flew up. The raindrops turned into stones almost covered the entire city, and a large cloud of dust filled the air under his feet. The human form was almost as huge as the entire Aurora City. With every move he made, Aurora City shook violently and collapsed again. At this time, countless white gas clouds gradually appeared in the sky, gathering together to form a huge fuzzy bird shape. Aha! Countless ice crystal feathers spread out from behind the huge white bird. Looking from a distance, the huge ice crystal groups tens of kilometers directly formed an extremely huge peacock screen. Chirp! A horrifying cry like a child's cry came from the sky. A white ice crystal peacock as huge as the black humanoid also appeared completely. The peacock and the human figure, two giant heads up and down, one white and one black, each almost divide this area into two spaces, one white and one black. A large number of people in Aurora City were killed and injured, but no one cared about it at this time. Even the Great Light Mecha could only run for its life. If it was accidentally touched by the white energy, it would be frozen, and there would be no resistance at all. The entire Aurora City completely collapsed as soon as the black humanoid appeared. A group of the top white light masters in the city quickly retreated under the protection of the surrounding mechas. The mechas opened fire wildly, and it took at least several seconds to concentrate the fire to shatter a stream of white energy. The sky is filled with countless white cold air, flying around like living creatures. In the protected central area, a group of leaders were cautious about the terrifying white gas that might be shot by the terrorists at any time. Boom! One of the huge wings of the ice crystal peacock spread out and pressed hard on a nearby building several thousand meters tall. The wings, which were much wider than the tall building, froze the entire upper part of the tall building the moment they touched it. Some people on the roof who had not had time to escape were instantly frozen to death and turned into ice corpses. The black humanoid was currently entangled in a fierce hand-to-hand fight with the ice crystal peacock. The two behemoths rolled crazily in Aurora City, and the peacock's sharp beak pecked out bloody holes hundreds of meters wide in the humanoid's body. The black human figure tore at the peacock's ice crystal wings, tearing off a large number of ice crystal feathers. Every time the two giants fight, the whole city and the space shakes and trembles. The general leader was away, and the white whale, as the temporary leader, narrowly avoided a huge feather of ice crystals that was shooting at him. At this time, the team finally successfully escaped from Aurora City, and he looked back towards Aurora City. The entire city of Nyata has completely fallen into collapse and destruction. At least one-third of the area was plunged into a sea of ice and snow. The snowflakes in the sky are getting bigger and bigger. This is no longer a non-relegation. White whale's voice trembled. For such a behemoth, every battle no longer involves the use of fighting skills and various techniques, but a complete primitive hand-to-hand fight. However, the battle between these two giants is just a personal fight between two top masters at the core. External manifestation. These two giants are not controlled by them, but the terrifying induction images formed spontaneously by their chi machines. This image represents the victory or defeat, advantages and disadvantages between the two people inside. That is the manifestation of all the collapsing forces in the fighting that automatically form on the outside. What the hell is going on? Beluga's heart was still beating rapidly and he felt that he was far enough away from the battle. I felt a little relieved. Who can tell me what the humanoid figure is lurking in the underground of our Aurora city? A leader said coldly. Carmen is missing. He went to save his daughter. If you go back in this situation, the man became quiet before he finished speaking. If you go back in this situation, you will die if you are not careful. Could it be that the black humanoid is actually our leader? The speaker was Phyla. He was floating next to the ice dragon, breathing heavily. The side of the mecha was frozen over a large area, and the engine behind it was only half of it was spraying particles, and it looked like it was seriously injured. What should we do next? The fourth wind god will look at the white whale. He is the dominant one here. You can't act rashly until you are sure what the black humanoid stance is, Beluga said firmly. Our power is weak in Thailand, so getting involved in this way will not help, and may also cause a burden to the black humanoid. We can only wait and see what happens. If all the maximum power satellite railguns are concentrated at the same time, someone proposed. White Whale pondered for a moment. He could still contact the main control terminal, and the secret control office was in the nearby city. Order to start preparations and focus the fire as soon as the situation becomes clear. Good. He then quickly issued a series of instructions to stabilize the escaping survivors and soldier mechas around him. Regroup as a group. But in the chaos, facing this almost invincible monster, not many mechas were willing to stay, and their morale collapsed at the beginning. The group worked hard for a while but could only gather a small amount of mechas. The fourth wind god general and the seventh general looked at the ice crystal peacock, who was still fighting from a distance from time to time, constantly guessing what big shot he had offended, and he actually provoked such a level of monsters to pressure the Aurora realm to hand over himself and others. He did not pay attention to the situation, but the more sensitive seventh wind god general next to him was a little alert. At this time, other leaders around him had unknowingly surrounded his Black Annihilation sect and others. From their flickering eyes, there seems to be a faint hint of danger. This monster came because of them. If the rebels of the Black Oblivion faction are handed over, the anger of the giant peacock monster may be quelled. Be careful, he pushed the fourth Fengshen general hard, avoiding a black sharp knife that stabbed from behind. You guys, Fourth's face suddenly darkened. Fortunately, he was pushed away by Old Seven, otherwise the consequences would be disastrous. The two of them led the Fengshen to bring the rebellious people under their command together. Only then did I realize that I was surrounded by people. The mechas around them all had evil intentions, and they were obviously trying to attack them. The white whale was standing not far away, and the giant mecha with the whale head driving this said nothing. Beluga, what do you mean? Fourth shouted in a low voice. What do you mean? The ice dragon next to the white whale came out, and a somewhat crazy voice sounded from the mecha. Of course I will catch you and use them as bait to give to the peacock monster. We have a plan to let you pretend Tsukuru was captured by us and sent to the monster. At the critical moment, you might just counterattack and kill the monster. Are you kidding me? Seventh said angrily. A monster of that level still wants to survive in his hands. Why don't you plan to go by yourself? Bing Long chuckled, spread his hands and said helplessly, I can't help it, it's not me who was pointed out. In his mecha's hand, he pulled out a huge ship-cutting knife and pointed it diagonally to the lower right. So, for everyone's safety, I'd better ask you to die. A white figure suddenly appeared behind the fourth wind god general. It was a white mecha with sharp and streamlined lines. The two spears behind it formed a cross. In an instant, the two spears shone with a white brilliance, forming a moon-white cross. Clang! the violent friction sound of the metal gun tip piercing into the mecha. The fourth Feng Shen used a lightning backhand sword and 2 spears to fight, but still failed to dodge the key blow to the head. The 2 mechas froze their movements in an instant, and the fourth Feng Shen general's right arm was suddenly shattered, and his limbs were severed by the double gun mecha. Brother of Light, what do you mean by this? The 7th Wind God General took a few steps back in horror, seeing that the double gun mecha showed no sign of resistance. What do you mean? Can't you see it yet? He wants to use us to defeat the enemy. A crazy low roar came from the cockpit of the 4th Wind God General. In the absence of the general leader, Your Majesty Beluga will assume all command authority. A cold female voice came from the double gun mecha, with a faint hint of fanaticism in the voice. You want us to die? No one can live, a mecha under the command of the Feng Shen general shouted loudly. The mecha shell suddenly opened, revealing densely packed nuclear high-compression bombs. Hiss. Suddenly, all the surrounding mecha masters took a breath of air. With so many nuclear high-compression bombs, no one can resist the instantaneous explosion power. At least half of the people present will die. It seems that you are well prepared, Beluga said calmly. This kind of bomb would only cause minor injuries to him at most, so he had no worries. It's just in case, I didn't expect it, the 4th Wind God General sneered. The cold wind howled fiercely, and the scene froze for a moment. No one dared to take action first. If General Feng Shen and others did not take action, no one wanted to die together, so naturally they would not move. Pa. 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 Suddenly, a crisp sound of applause floated from a distance. A figure only over 2 meters tall slowly approached in the heavy snow under the dark clouds. What a good plan, a deep man's voice came. As the figure got closer, everyone could see clearly who was speaking. It's actually a giant humanoid wolf with 2 wolf heads. He was also wearing the unique white tight-fitting combat uniform worn by humans. The outlines of his strong muscles were clearly highlighted, and his long black hair was like a lion's mane, constantly being blown back by the cold wind. Unfortunately, the Supreme Master has already issued an order, the 2-headed werewolf said in a low voice with extremely pious expression on his face. Everyone present will return to the embrace of the universe. He showed a ferocious smile. No one is exempt.